Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of From the Desk of Jamison Greenwood, produced by NJB Enterprises and broadcasting from the Kactus Radio in Phoenix, Arizona. A story of a broken washing machine, a lemon meringue pie, and a whole lot more awaits you as we spend our time together this evening, so I hope you'll enjoy. And to those who don't want to hear it, well, there's just nothing you can do. So I thought we'd actually get started with this week with the answers to last week's trivia quiz. As you'll recall, the three categories were... Ivan, do you recall what the categories were? I got them. I was just testing you, buddy. Okay. So our categories were Disney movies, U.S. presidents, and card game rules. And the correct answer to the first question, what was the first Disney animated film to get a PG rating, was B, The Black Cauldron. And I have an editor's note that I gotta add in here. When I gave the answers on screen on last week's show, for one of the answers, The Little Mermaid, I neglected to put a silent E at the end of little, and I sincerely regret this grammatical error. Now, moving on to the second question, which of these U.S. presidents did not assume the office after the assassination of his predecessor? The correct answer for this question was B, Ulysses S. Grant, who, after serving in the Union Army during the Civil War, decided to run for president when Andrew Johnson did not seek re-election. Grant served 2 terms. He was elected in 1868 and re-elected in 1872. Now, the last question on our quiz was, in which card game is the objective to get a meld of 7 cards of the same rank? And the correct answer, once again, was B, Canasta. Now, there were 2 patterns that if you watched carefully you may have noticed about the quiz. On all of the answers, all of the answers were the same letter, and the second, possibly less obvious pattern, is that each question had a trick answer that was obviously wrong. In the first question, An American Tail is not actually a Disney movie. It was in fact produced by Amblin Entertainment and was directed by Don Bluth, who was a Disney expatriate. Now, the second question, Jefferson Davis was not the correct answer because he was the president of the Confederacy during the Civil War, and after the war he became president again, but this time of an insurance company. And in the last question, Magic the Gathering was the outlier because the other 3 games all played more or less... The other 3 games, Pinochle, Canasta, and Contract Bridge, are all played more or less with standard 52-card decks of playing cards, whereas Magic the Gathering is a trading card game which has many, many diverse cards that you can buy or print off the internet, and they all have very distinct, diverse powers, which I do not yet understand. Hopefully someday I will. So, we'll have a new quiz later on in the show, but for now, let's jump into this week's reminiscence. Like many American kids, I grew up in the suburbs of a large city. To the central west of Phoenix, the city of Avondale runs for about 10 miles from Indian School Road in the north, south to Estrella Mountain, and from 99th Avenue in the east to about Litchfield Road in the west. Now, within the city limits were many master-planned housing developments, and it was within such a location that I spent my childhood. We had a majestic 2-story Spanish-styled house with white stucco walls and red-tiled roofs like so many Phoenix-era homes in that time. Inside, the first floor had our eat-in kitchen, where my mother prepared her delicious homemade Rice Krispie treats. We had an oversized 3-car garage, and our living room, where we would gather with all of my grandparents, cousins, and uncles and aunts every Christmas, eating, opening our presents, and dancing around the Christmas tree in the Scandinavian tradition. Upstairs was my parents' room, where my sister and Macy and I would engage in pillow warfare with our father, along with Macy's bedroom filled with her Barbies and her ferret Rex. But my favorite place was my bedroom, where I retreated to read my many books and listen to my old vinyl records of Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Ray Conniff. Our home was situated on a curved street within the Stucco Gardens development at 12987 West Burnt Sienna Lane. Like most suburban neighborhoods, many families called this area home. To the east of us lived the Bradbury family, consisting of Mrs. Bradbury, a nurse who was from San Jose, California, and her 2 daughters, Chloe, who was 5 years older than me, and Mary, who was 1 year younger than me. Their father, Mr. Bradbury, was a philosophy professor, but he was deceased. He died of a heart attack while Mrs. Bradbury was giving birth to Mary because he was too squeamish. Now, despite that, things mostly went just fine for the Bradburys, but when I was about 10, there were 3 awful things that afflicted this poor family. First being that Mrs. Bradbury was mauled by an otter that had been left on her doorstep as part of a ding-dong ditch prank, and she ended up spending 2 days in the hospital. While she was in the hospital, a supply hose for the washing machine exploded and damaged the back end of the machine, so Chloe and Mary woke up to find their house flooded, and then Mrs. Bradbury had to replace the carpet. The third problem, which actually wasn't necessarily a problem, but I'll explain it in a minute, was that Chloe got a boyfriend named Dylan who had a Ford T-Bird and played basketball for the Estrella Valley Amoebas, and had a reputation for bringing Chloe back late. Now that last one was a problem to me especially, because when I was 10 years old, Chloe Bradbury was my exclusive secret love. I was too young at the time to understand how important a friendship with a girl is to a healthy romantic interest, but I found myself under the youthful spell of her looks. She had jet black hair like Miranda Cosgrove, and beautiful gray eyes. She always looked very professional in her red and white cheerleader uniform, and although I never cared much for watching ball games, I always wish I could have gone just to see her do her cheerleading stunts. Sometimes in the afternoons, though, when I got home from school, I would crouch down behind the couch in the living room and glance through the big picture window, longing for her return from cheer practice. When Mrs. Bradbury or Dylan brought her home, I would part the shears, glance carefully over the sill, and watch her until she disappeared, like Mowgli watched the girl from the man village at the end of the Jungle Book. But anyway, now the Bradburys needed to get their washer fixed, and Mrs. Bradbury mentioned this to my father one Saturday morning when he was coming back from getting the mail. And then he came into the family kitchen and family room of our house where my sister and I were on the floor playing with her Fisher-Price dollhouse and my Matchbox cars, and my mother was seated at the kitchen table sipping a glass of Diet Pepsi and reading a day-old copy of the New York Times. So then Dad came in and spoke to Mom. "Helen, I was just talking to Lisa. She's had to spend about $2,000 to get all of that carpet changed, and she's not going to be able to get her washer fixed for another month. With all that stress she's under financially and the trouble of Chloe and her boyfriend Dylan, I think it would be nice if we offered to fix that washer for her." Now, I hadn't been paying attention, but when he mentioned Chloe's name, I perked up. Meanwhile, my mother began to process this. As a successful accountant for the city of Dockdale, she was skeptical about whether it was necessary for us to put this sort of money on the line. "That's a nice thought, Carl, don't get me wrong." She took off her reading glasses as she looked towards Dad. "But that's going to mean money out of our pocket. You're not going to be able to buy any antiques for a while." Now, my dad was an avid collector of Lionel trains and other vintage items, and was not too happy about that, so he breathed a deep sigh. "Well, I guess we don't have to fix the washer, then." "I didn't say that was a reason not to," Mom exclaimed. "I'm just giving you a hard time, dear. I'm okay with it." "But how are we going to move it?" Mom asked. "We don't have a truck or trailer." "Well, we'll put it in the trunk of the Mercury," Dad proposed. Mom looked at him like a parent who looks at a kid that's just lied about a broken vase. "That trunk is big enough for 5 dead bodies," my dad exclaimed. "We can carry a washer in it." "If you're sure," Mom said with a hiss that said this is not going to go well. Nevertheless, my father opened up the garage door and backed my mother's 1998 Mercury Grand Marquis out of the driveway and towards the Bradbury house and rang the doorbell. I watched the scene unfold from my parents' bedroom window upstairs, hoping to get a glance of Chloe. Mrs. Bradbury opened up the door and received him. Then Dylan, who had been visiting, begrudgingly helped my dad lift their bisque-colored Kenmore washing machine into the back of the Grand Marquis. Much to my surprise, it managed to fit in the trunk, but it pushed the back end of the car much closer to the ground, and the lid would not shut all the way. Dad took some bungee cords out of our garage and used them to secure the lid as far as he could, though the washer still stuck out pretty far. Then Dad came into the house to call the rest of us to go to the shop, and Macy came upstairs to get me. "Jimmy, Mommy, and Daddy say it's time to go." I took a leak in the powder room behind the garage, then got into the back seat of the car with Macy. We drove from Stucco Gardens in the Grand Marquis out to the 101 freeway to begin our journey. As we passed by the Cardinals Stadium and the Westgate Shopping Center, Dad requested Macy and I to keep watch over the washing machine and make sure it didn't tumble out. Macy, who was playing with her My-Meba's pet, only glanced back occasionally, but I was so nervous and so in love with Chloe that I didn't take my eyes off the trunk lid for 1 second. I wanted to seem like I was taking care of her, and I found my neck almost immobile when we arrived at the repair shop in Youngtown at about 111th Avenue and Olive. Frankie's TV and Appliance was the anchor store of a large shopping plaza, and it looked nothing like a repair shop to me. There were numerous shiny displays of cooktops, refrigerators, ovens, and dishwashers in white, black, and stainless steel, a variety of widescreen TVs blaring Megyn Kelly on Fox News, and no sign of previously repaired appliances. We were then approached by the only associate, a thin 80-year-old geezer with white hair wearing a beige windbreaker, plaid shirt, faded jeans, and beige Velcro tennis shoes.
"Can I help you folks with anything?"
"Yeah," my dad replied. "I was hoping we could get our neighbor's washing machine fixed. Can you give us an estimate?" The man gave us a surprised look.
"Well, this is just a sales office," the man replied. "You gotta take that thing out to Glendale if you want to get it repaired."
My dad was angry, but maintained his composure. "Okay, sorry about that," replied my father. So we got back on the road again, and I kept my eyes focused on that trunk without even blinking. Okay, well, we have to take a little break now, but when we come back, we'll find out if the washer got fixed and a whole lot more. You are listening to From the Desk of Jamison Greenwood on KCTS.